Welcome into CyHawk Talk here on a Sunday, doing a rewind, looking back at wins for Iowa State over Arkansas State and Iowa over UMass. But before we get into that, I just have something to say about the latest AP poll. Notre Dame is number 24. And listen, I love the Irish. I think they're fantastic, and they're definitely one of the bloods in the nation. But an 0-2 team should not still be ranked in the top 25 in week 3 going into week 4, I guess I should, because they'll be the number 24 team in the country in week 4. The top 25 AP poll is a real time snapshot of college football. They might be a 10-2 team at the end of the year. I understand that both their losses were top 10 teams. That's fantastic. They're still 0-2. South Florida has 2 ranked wins and 1 ranked loss, and they're unranked this week. The AP poll is quite ridiculous. And there was all the talk about the one voter last week who moved Florida up after a horrible, horrible loss to South Florida. And so I don't know if we necessarily have the best and brightest on the AP poll, but let me tell you what, they absolutely got Notre Dame's ranking wrong this week. We're not predicting the future. We're telling you what's happening right now. That's my take on the AP poll. Ben, am I off base? Let me do a little audience testing here. Am I off base with my top 25 take?
Yeah, what a week in AP poll discussion. I saw that last week with the whole Florida USF thing, and there are a lot of reasons for why individual writers might get something wrong. I think you should own up to it when you do. It's not a lot of fun to vote in the AP poll. Ethan, I don't know if you do it. I don't, and a lot of times they're up till 3 a.m. just trying to get that ballot in, right as you were trying to leave Kinnick Stadium yesterday. In terms of what I think about the Notre Dame thing this time, yeah, 0-2, both close losses. I don't know. I kind of view the AP poll as you bring together what you think you know about a team entering the season, because if not, what else are you bringing in? If not, would you have wanted USF before they lost last week to be the number one overall team because of its ranked wins against Boise State and Florida? So I think you have to use some sort of balance of what you think you know about a roster before and what they've done in the games that they've played. You also had a little bit of an issue with Iowa State moving up 2 spots to number 12. I saw in your tweet you thought they maybe should have stayed level.
It wasn't an impressive win. I get it was on the road. But you'll tell me about maybe why they should move up, or maybe why I was right and that they should have stayed where they were. But watching that game in the press box, at Kinnick, I think I was more interested in that one. Everyone else was watching the Georgia Tennessee game in the press box before Iowa kicked off. But I was just kind of watching that game, like, man, what do we know about Iowa State at this point, given how bad Kansas State's been since? And who Iowa's played. I mean, South Dakota, it's an FCS win. That was a good FCS win, but it's still an FCS team. And then you look at who Iowa State's beaten. It's like, do we really know anything about the Cyclones at this point, given how poor some of their 2 big wins over Kansas State and Iowa appear to be at this point? Because Iowa only has wins over an FCS opponent and perhaps the worst FBS team in the country right now. So it's just like, I don't know if Iowa State's a top 15 team, but maybe there's no one else that is above them right now because they are 4-0. I don't know. Take it away. Tell me what your takeaways were from the ugly win in Jonesboro.
Yeah, it wasn't an impressive win that I think would elevate Iowa State's stature in the eyes of anybody. This was a one-score game, a lot closer throughout the entire matchup than I think Iowa State fans who came into it a 3-touchdown favorite were comfortable with it being. Ultimately, Rocco Becht and the Cyclones, win another one-score game, go down on the field, and get the job done. Arkansas State scored 2 go-ahead touchdowns in the fourth quarter that were called back because of a field goal. So certainly not a comfortable win for the Cyclones. But I think I had this discussion on X, Ethan, is you look at these first 4 games, which Matt Campbell called part of the most difficult schedule in all of the nation. And Campbell's logic behind that, Ethan, if I'm reading him right, wasn't as much that, hey, the Kansas State and the Iowa win are going to, bolster a college football playoff resume. And we've seen in recent weeks that those 2 losses, those 2 wins look even less impressive because of the struggles that those 2 teams have had. The difficulty in Iowa State's first 4 games came in the what and the why. They played in Ireland. And then, 6 days later came back and played a top five FCS opponent. And then they played their ultimate arch rival in a stadium, Jack Trice, that they hadn't won in since 2011, that CyHawk game. So they did that, and then they got to go play in 100-degree heat in Jonesboro, Arkansas. None of those wins on paper look very much impressive, but when you compile it all and look at what the Cyclones did in these first four games, which Matt Campbell always says, coming back from Ireland, teams don't do well. Well, the Cyclones were able to get out of that unscathed, get into the bye week. Now they're going to be able to recharge a little bit. So ultimately, I do think that these first four games, are an impressive measure of maybe the heart and the maturity of this Cyclone team that is going to give them an opportunity to play some big time football later in the season.
Sounds like they got lucky and they got one of their rivals on a neutral site and their other rival at home. So really they were even worse wins than we think. That's what I'm hearing, Ben. No, I'm just messing around. I think that, we do have to say, hey, they're 4-0. You can only win the games on your schedule, and, all wins count the same in the win column, right? So you can look at that Arkansas State game and maybe be a little bit concerned about some of the bigger games ahead, but a win is a win, and you're moving on into the bye week 4-0. What was your number two takeaway for the number 12 Cyclones?
I was impressed with some things the Cyclones did without their tight end, Gabe Burkle, and I was not impressed with other things. I think it was a mixed bag without tight end Gabe Burkle, who had a groin injury. He picked up on Thursday in practice. So Matt Campbell said it was, just not the right decision to have him out there. And Burkle, we know this Iowa State offense likes to run through the tight ends. They weren't really throwing to him on Saturday. We saw Rocco Becht only target Benjamin Bramer, I think, two or three times. Bramer only came up with one catch. So really, Rocco Becht was going out there and trying to find, guys who aren't his top two weapons. And we saw some mixed bag stuff from Dominic Overby, who had a touchdown. Xavier Townsend finally popped. The transfer receiver had a career high 92 receiving yards, including a big catch over the shoulder in the fourth quarter. And then I saw some stuff that, maybe makes you think that, hey, the Cyclones are going to need these tight ends back. Chase Sowell had a brutal drop in the Cyclones territory in the fourth quarter that would have extended a drive. You saw a miscommunication with the backup tight end, Alexander. I think that's something where if he gets those primary reps all the time in practice, you don't have that. But Alexander ended up dropping a ball, on a miscommunication with Rocco Becht. So I don't know. There are things that I did like and things that I didn't like. But something Brady Quinn told me on Friday when he came to Ames last week, is that Iowa State is going to need a WR1 to step up, and I'm not sure they have that guy yet.
And my apologies if you weren't planning on talking about this, but I think to wrap up the Iowa State portion of the show, we need to address the $4 million elephant in the room here in the potential savings or the hypothetical savings that Iowa State had in playing a road game against Arkansas State. Plenty of discussion online yesterday about that. Your story from Friday did very well, talking about maybe the rationale behind the decision to play that road game. But it does, as your Burning Headlines article asks, are these games that Iowa State needs to stop playing?
Yeah, Ethan, it's a great question. And, go read the story if you haven't. I'm able to kind of give you what Campbell talked about on Tuesday, and then Jamie Pollard actually talked a lot about his rationale for going on the road. And ultimately, we won't get into the financials here, but it saves Iowa State, just under probably $4 million going to in Ohio, where they went in 2023 and lost, going to a Jonesboro, Arkansas. In 2027, Iowa State will go play at Bowling Green. And my takeaway, my verdict, Ethan, was, hey, if you can save that $4 million and pay a roster that's going to be good enough to go win against every single group of five opponent, then by all means go play these games. But if you can't put that $4 million toward a roster and toward NIL specifically with your football team, and you're in some of these close games against mid-major teams that you shouldn't be, then I don't think it's worth it to continuing playing these games. That's one question I ask myself. As Arkansas State appeared to take a lead twice in the fourth quarter before they got called back, is man, they might have saved $4 million playing this game. But how much would a loss here cost in terms of the AP poll dropping out of that? Big noon kickoff doesn't come to Iowa State. You lose kind of national appeal. Iowa State wants to go to another Pop-Tarts Bowl and play another one of these high-profile games. That all takes a hit when you lose at Jonesboro, Arkansas, against a team that they beat by like 35 points at home the year before. So an interesting
Hold your
discussion.
horses here, Hutchins. Hold your horses. They want to play in another Pop Tarts Bowl. We're not swinging higher, aiming higher here than the Pop Tarts Bowl.
I think I wrote, they want to play, of course, in the college football playoff or a high profile bowl game. Hey, man, Pop Tarts Bowl. Who wouldn't want to go play in another Pop Tarts Bowl?
Okay, but is there not the perception that this is a college football playoff team, considering the path and the fact that they already have two of their biggest rivalry wins out of the way?
There is that perception. But you hear Iowa State, you talk to any football coach, any football player, say, what's your goal this season? Win the national championship. Interestingly, more often than not, I hear Iowa State players say win the Big 12 championship, which of course gets them into the college football playoff. So I think Iowa State looks at it as, eating the elephant bite by bite. They gotta win a conference championship first, and then they'll set their sights on the natty. Is how I'm reading into it.
Well, I guess Ben is just too fair and balanced for me to get him to make any big proclamations or walk back a Pop Tarts Bowl goal here on the show. But we'll go ahead and start talking a little bit about Iowa versus UMass. My number one takeaway was obviously Ferentz stands alone, picking up the 206th win as the head coach of the Hawkeyes, surpassing Ohio State coaching legend Woody Hayes as the winningest coach in the Big Ten. I did some coverage of this going into the season because we assumed Kirk Ferentz was going to break this record. And I've kind of labeled him as the ultimate standard in college football. I don't think you'll see a lot of coaches stay around for 20 plus seasons, let alone 27. I think it's going to be rare to see guys last, 10 years in college, in one spot in college football anymore as we move into the NIL era. And it's going to be so hard to sustain success like Nick Saban was able to do at Alabama. You're not going to be able to, recruit these rosters. My alma mater, Nebraska, has a backup quarterback who's looked really good in very limited opportunity in the last two games, and people are already talking about how he's definitely gone. And he's going to go be a starter next year. So I just think that it's going to be really hard to retain rosters, and that makes Kirk Ferentz kind of the almost unattainable gold standard of college football coaches these days. And every week I post the instant reaction, his opening statement from the press conference on TikTok, and the last 2 weeks it's been, this guy needs to retire. It's time. We need to just let him get the record and then have a booster buy him out. All that sort of stuff. And be careful what you wish for, because this guy is as good as it gets in college football when it comes to coaches. He is able to, consistently have success. Very few losing seasons in his career, particularly after you control for those first two seasons where he was really trying to get the ball rolling, which is another anomaly in college football these days. I look at Deshaun Foster, slow start, and he's already gone at UCLA. Kirk Ferentz won 4 games over his first 2 years. And then he was able to go on and have a ton of success and win a Big Ten championship, I believe, in 2004. So he's kind of a relic of a time gone by, but at the same time, he's exactly what every program should want to hire, is a guy who's going to be there for more than 20 years and break the conference record for wins. I think that's ultimately what every program needs to strive for, and I think that's kind of what Iowa State has in Matt Campbell right now, which makes that program, as we discussed last week, maybe the one you feel is in a better spot because he's got plenty of years left, whereas Ferentz might be getting close to the end of his career. And as I mentioned in my burning questions story for today, he even mentioned the vague next guy during his press conference last night in the retention of the swarm tradition where the players all link arms and run out on the field together. He participated in it for the first time ever yesterday on the way back into the locker room after the game. And he said, as long as I'm here, that'll be something we do. The next guy can do things differently, but that's what I'm going to do. And it's like, oh, the next guy, what do you mean the next guy? I'm sure people will get their tinfoil hat on and go crazy over that comment. But I just think he's the gold standard, and Iowa fans should be thankful and happy to have had him for 27 years.
Did the post game press conferences and festivities might have even been a correct word to describe the kind of celebration of the accomplishment of Kirk Ferentz. Did it all feel like a funeral for a guy who's still alive?
I don't think it felt like a funeral at all. It was just, a lot of optimism. The passing game finally showed a little something yesterday, and it felt like, maybe there is still a little bit of life in this program, in this team, in this coach. And so it didn't feel like it was the end of anything, I would say. He certainly kept us waiting for almost 45 minutes after we got Mark Gronowski for his press conference. They were going real long on the radio, from what I understand, but no, a lot of reflection in that post game press conference. We only got one question in about the game. Actually, the rest to Coach Ferentz was about what the record meant, and he certainly seemed pleased, but still like he wanted and had some stuff out there that he wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, there's only so much you can ask from an overmatched UMass team. What were some of your other takeaways?
Like I mentioned, the passing game finally got going, and that's something I predicted would happen. Interestingly enough, UMass went from the 11th worst pass defense in the country to the 16th worst pass defense in the country. So maybe one of their better performances against the pass, or maybe some other teams just had worse games that allowed those statistics to move around a little bit. But Iowa threw for 234 yards, a season high. Gronowski threw for, man, number escapes me at the moment. Let me pull up my stats here. I don't have my mouse. Never mind. Go back to the paper because I'm a geezer. Mark Gronowski threw for 179 yards, two touchdowns. He had 120 yards and two touchdowns in the first quarter. 8 for 10. It was excellent. It was exactly the start you were looking for. They placed an emphasis on starting fast, and they did that. Going into the game, I said I was looking for the play calling to be better. I was looking for the pass game to get going, get into a rhythm. They did both those things. I really liked Tim Lester's play calling to start the game, getting aggressive, pushing the ball downfield, maybe not necessarily emptying the tool bag, but getting into it a little bit deeper than we had previously. And it looked good. And I think you should feel encouraged by what you saw if you're an Iowa fan.
What were your final thoughts on, kind of the last reprieve and now we get into some real football for Iowa?
Well, that's exactly it. It's like, can the passing game keep this going? You're going from the 121st pass defense in the country to the 57th in Rutgers next week. For comparison, Iowa State's 40th right now in the country. Rutgers is allowing just under 200 yards per game through the air. So you're looking at Marker now. This is kind of a prove it game now. It's like, okay, we have signs of life. We know you can at least do it. Now go prove it that you can do it against the teams we're going to be playing for the rest of the year before things get really hard, when Indiana comes to town the next week for homecoming, Oregon comes to town, Penn State comes to town, even Minnesota. That's a team that has struggled, but it's going to be a big rivalry game. So it's like we need to see it next week so that we can have this confidence and sustain it through the rest of the year. I believe it's possible. There's certainly signs of life. Kirk Ferentz said he hopes to be a better team in week 4 than they were in week 1, week 2. And that's exactly what we've seen. They've kind of improved every week. The U Albany game makes evaluation really hard because they were so bad, but I have confidence that they'll get it taken care of and continue improving.
I did have the joke last night as I watched Arkansas State kind of hang in a game. I said, man, maybe this is where it makes a little bit more sense to schedule a UMass or to schedule an Albany.
Well, going back to the scheduling thing, I had an idea when you were talking about that. If they want to save money by going on the road to an inferior opponent, why not play a road game against UNI, a road game against Drake? They're in state, lower travel costs. Heck, if you played Drake, you could sleep in whatever team hotel they use in Ames before a home game. They can just stay in that hotel the day before a Drake game, and play those teams. Those would be sellouts for those teams. UNI would absolutely pack the dome for that game. There might be more Cardinal than purple in the stands for that game, kind of like when Caitlin Clark came to the McLeod Center 3 years ago and beat up on the Panthers. But I think that would be really cool. And I'm a huge advocate for the in-state rivalries for those smaller schools to get a chance. I was talking about it in the college basketball when Iowa released its non-con schedule this last week. I mentioned it on X. But I just think that'd be really cool. And I think that's what made college football great. It was the regional aspect to it. And I feel like we've gotten away from that a little bit. It's like, yeah, I know Arkansas is kind of close to Iowa, but Is that a tradition like, oh yeah, the Red Wolves, man, we've had such a great tradition facing off against the Red Wolves, like barf. Like, no, you don't. Quit scheduling MAC schools and go, go play in the Unidome once. I just like to see it.
I know you're always looking out for the little guy, Ethan, but I think Iowa State A doesn't want to go play a team, like UNI, which has a roster full of players who felt like they should have been Cyclones.
Spare me with that garbage. All right,
And,
you
and
can pay for your roster at Iowa State. You can't pay for your roster at UNI. Okay, UNI would be so outmatched in that game if Iowa State lost. I mean, that's on them. That's on them at that point. It's not going to be. I hate to count out the little guy. I know David and Goliath happens, but with the way college football is now, such an upset is going to be like it was already very rare. It's going to become incredibly, incredibly non-existent, rare, very seldom, like 1 in 1,000 upset that happens in college football.
NIU. I'll just point out to NIU. Notre Dame. They beat Notre Dame last year.
That's still FBS to FBS. Both those schools are technically playing for the same national championship, technically playing and recruiting the same caliber of players. I thought you were calling UNI NIU for a second. I was like, man, the Panther fans are going to rip you on
No.
the in the comment section. But it just the FCS FBS rivalry, those games shouldn't even be played. I mean, look at what happened yesterday, Nebraska Houston Christian. It was 50
Yeah.
57-7. I everyone on Twitter is like, why do we even play these games anymore? They were saying we should be playing these as spring exhibition games. It's these teams are playing in different realms. It's MLB versus high A football or baseball almost. It's just I don't think that you would have any concern going on the road in state. There would be more Cyclone fans at that game than UNI fans. I
It sounds like when they get the council together to solve college football's problems, I think you need to be on it, Ethan.
I agree. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and get into our report cards for both teams. We're replacing the playoff-ometer with report cards right after this. Welcome back to CyHawk Talk here on a Sunday, doing a Sunday rewind, grading Iowa State against Arkansas State. Dr. Ben, Professor Ben, Professor Hutchins, Dr. Hutchins, what did you come away with? What's your grade for Iowa State's first exam in College Football 101 this semester?
Iowa State got an A+ for grit, which I'm not sure that's a traditional class you take, but it sure matters a heck of a lot when you got to go play in Jonesboro, Arkansas in 100-degree temperatures. Um, the Cyclones had to grit this one out, and it showed up most on a final drive before halftime when Iowa State gets the ball back with 38 seconds left. The Red Wolves have just scored to seize all sorts of momentum in this game, and Iowa State doesn't even need 38 seconds. Rocco Beck goes down, and in 4 plays, he scores a touchdown using 28 seconds. That showed me a lot of grit, a lot of trust. And I think that's ultimately maybe going to be what we look back on as the difference in this game. Now, you know, in such a close game against an overmatched opponent, there's going to be some bad grades. And Iowa State's special teams has a D. I know the unit that won them CyHawk. I saw a lot of Iowa fans thinking back to how perfect Iowa State's, well, not perfect, because they had the muffed punt. But the special teams play won them CyHawk, and special teams was a disaster on Saturday. Kyle Conradi got hurt. We're not sure about his status. Ethan, he ended up leaving the game around halftime after he missed an extra point and missed a field goal attempt badly. So you could tell maybe that there was something up with Kyle Conradi. We're waiting on his status. But the other things, like Drew Surgis roughing a punter on a or on a 4th and long, extended an Arkansas State drive that turned into Red Wolves points. That was a killer. Tyler Perkins, the sure-handed holder slash punter for the Cyclones, dropped a punt in his own end zone. It could have been disaster for the Cyclones, but Perkins was able to pick it up and boot it away. So just a lot of poor showing on special teams for the Cyclones that they were fortunately for them able to overcome. And something I thought had some good and bad was the play calling. Iowa State knew it could run the ball all over Arkansas State, and it did. I think both running backs averaged, well over 5 yards a carry. They both looked great. Abu Sama ripped off some big plays, but Iowa State just wasn't able to run the ball as much as I thought it should have. I think it got a little too pass first at times, and it cost them. Arkansas State dominated the time of possession. And it's like, even if Iowa State's able to hand the ball off and get 5 yards a carry every time, it just didn't feel like they ever really had a strong control of the game. So a mixed bag in terms of the play calling, earns it a B minus.
You mentioned Kyle Conradi and maybe the curse of the X post proclaiming him as the best kicker in the nation from the Iowa State football account on X. Kind of gets, puts a little hex on him. It's like the announcer's jinx. Maybe it's the X post jinx there on Conradi. But kind of a similar takeaway for my first grade on Iowa's win over UMass. I'm also going to the special teams. I'm giving him a C because, boy, the return game was an A plus plus plus. Caden Weegan, absolutely dominant. He had 3 returns for 87 yards before he pops the 95-yard punt return touchdown, which set a Kinnick Stadium record, tied the all-time program record for the longest punt return for a touchdown in history. And then kick return equally as effective, though they didn't have as much opportunity to showcase that on Saturday. But then the kicking was, horrible. Drew Stevens misses a PAT, bounces it off the left upright, misses a 38-yard field goal after making a 54-yard field goal, and then they have a punt blocked. Reese Dakin had a punt blocked, and that set up the lone UMass touchdown of the afternoon. So you're kind of looking at the special teams like, man, half of that was amazing, and you cannot ask for more. And then the other half of that is it can't get any worse. So we're going to have to split it right in half. It's a C, and it's going to be whatever happened in punt protection. You need to figure that out before you go and play in the Big Ten, because that sort of thing can be the difference in a game. And then also field goals. You're leaving points off the board. 4 points lost yesterday. Could have been a 51-7 win. Instead, it's 47-7. Boo-hoo. But Big Ten game, a lot of those are going to be decided by 4 points. I mean, you just lost to Iowa State by 3. 4 points would have won that game. You can't be giving away points like that. So it's going to be a C for me on special teams. The passing game, grading this one on a curve. I'm giving them a B. If they did it against Iowa State, that would have been an A plus. It's a B because he did it against UMass. It looked really good in the first quarter. That would have been probably an A minus still on the curve, but it's going to be a B because in the second quarter, things kind of fell apart. Gronowski went 3 for 9, only had 40 yards, didn't get in the end zone. They had a 3-and-out, a lot of drops, and then I believe the consensus was 3 drops and 3 WTF throws from Gronowski in the second quarter. And then, whoa, Hank Brown had a dime of a touchdown pass in the third quarter. So maybe we went from an A minus in the first quarter down to a C plus in the second quarter, and then that backup unit gets it back up to the B for passing game. And then play calling, I'm going to give it an A plus. I was really thrilled with it, even as the offense continued to struggle. They didn't, go into a shell at all. They didn't hunker down and go, oh, okay, we're just going to run the ball to win the game like they did against UAlbany. They're, we're going to let you figure it out as we go here. I really appreciated that from Tim Lester because I think he understands that this is his last opportunity to kind of, work out those wrinkles before it gets really hard to do that in game. And I thought that you could see a pretty confident Mark Gronowski in the post-game press conference because they were able to work through those second quarter kinks and get things going again by the third quarter by the time that Hank Brown entered the game.
We should start keeping track of WTF throws. That's a good stat.
Yeah, we need to get PFF on that. We need a official criteria for a WTF throw. Maybe we'll work on that and present our findings to the PFF crew by Wednesday, but that'll be it for CyHawk Talk here on a Sunday. Thank you for watching. We'll be back on Wednesday.